Welcome to Debate the News True Crime. I'm your host, Joseph Labosco, here with my amazing other host, Adrian Barker. Tonight's case is one of New England's darkest and most perplexing family tragedies, the deaths and disappearances tied to the Carman family of Connecticut. A wealthy patriarch shot in his bed, a mother lost at sea under mysterious circumstances, and a son, Nathan, whose survival story and behavior raised more questions than answers. It's a saga that stretches nearly a decade and leaves no one untouched.
So before we get into it, a warning. This episode discusses murder, disappearance at sea, mental health struggles, and family conflict. Listener discretion is advised. We approach every case with respect for victims and their families. May they rest in peace. And as always, we're not attorneys or law enforcement. This is a live discussion show with minimal editing, and any individual not convicted in a court of law is presumed innocent until proven guilty.
Absolutely, Adrian. And with that said, how does one family end up with two mysterious deaths, millions at stake, and a single person standing at the center of it all? Let's walk through the full timeline of the Carman family tragedy. 1990s to 2013, we're going to give you some family background. Nathan Carman grows up in Vermont and Connecticut as the only child of Linda Carman. Nathan is diagnosed with autism at age 4, struggles socially, and experiences escalating behavioral and mental health challenges as he enters adolescence. He becomes increasingly isolated, at times living in a small trailer on the family's Windsor, Connecticut property. His grandfather, John, is financially generous but demanding. He supports Nathan with yearly payments, but also pressures him to work, attend school, and, quote, be responsible. Family members later claim that John frequently dismissed Nathan's mental health issues, causing conflict with Linda over how to help him.
So on December 20th, 2013, just before Christmas, 87-year-old John is found shot to death in his Windsor home. One bullet to the head, fired at close range as he slept. No signs of forced entry, no robbery, and police quickly learned Nathan had recently purchased a Sig Sauer rifle in New Hampshire. I think I said that right, Joseph? The same caliber believed used in the killing. And when questioned, Nathan first denies owning a gun, and then he claims the rifle went missing. And investigators also learned that Nathan discarded his computer hard drive and a GPS unit from his truck the morning after the murder. And with no eyewitnesses, no recovered weapons, and no direct forensic evidence, police publicly labeled Nathan a person of interest, but they do not charge him, and the case goes cold.
2014, Nathan inherits roughly $550,000 through accounts naming him as a beneficiary. Meanwhile, John's estimated $40 million plus estate is divided among his 4 daughters, including Linda. As Linda's only child, Nathan would inherit her share, about $7 million. The family's other daughters are alarmed. They quietly begin documenting their concerns about Nathan's behavior and potential involvement in John's death. Within months, tensions escalate into a private family standoff over money, motive, and safety.
Woo. September 17, 2016, 3 years after the murder, Nathan invites Linda on an overnight fishing trip aboard his 31-foot boat called the Chickenpox. They depart from South Kingston, Rhode Island, and though they told friends they planned to fish near Block Island, Nathan instead steers the boat roughly about like 60 to 70 miles offshore towards Block Canyon, which is far deeper waters with little traffic and notoriously unpredictable conditions. And that night, according to Nathan, the engine makes a strange noise and the boat suddenly takes on water. And within minutes, the vessel sinks. And he claims he saw his mother near him one moment and gone the next. And he never radios for help.
To fully understand the disappearance, here's some information that investigators later documented. The water was deep ocean, roughly 600 feet in the canyon, too deep for standard recovery efforts. The nighttime sea state was moderate 3 to 5 foot swells, drifting currents moving northwest. The Coast Guard calculated that a person without flotation would likely sink instantly in those depths. With flotation, they drift rapidly and unpredictably. Search teams combed more than 62,000 square miles over 6 days. No life jacket, no clothing, no body, and no debris linked to Linda were ever recovered. Experts later testified that in that sector of the Atlantic, bodies lost at sea are rarely recoverable due to the current's sheer speed and depth. In other words, her body could easily have sunk immediately or drifted into an unsearchable sector within hours.
After 8 days adrift, Nathan is found floating alone in a life raft by a passing freighter southeast of Martha's Vineyard. He's dehydrated, but he's stable. Linda is never found. And the Coast Guard, they end its search and they classify her as deceased. But suspicion skyrockets. Investigators quickly uncover evidence contradicting the accidental sinking narrative.
So, authorities and witnesses reveal a series of troubling facts. A marina worker saw Nathan removing trim tabs from the transom hours before departure. Essentially, he left 4 open holes in the hull of the boat. He patched them with putty instead of marine epoxy, which is what you would typically do if you were going to patch those holes. A repair expert said would fail almost immediately offshore. The bait he purchased for their quote unquote fishing trip never made it on the boat, and investigators found no radio distress call despite working equipment. A forensic review concluded that the Chickenpox boat was rendered unseaworthy by human action, not mechanical failure. In 2019, a federal judge ruled Nathan was more likely than not responsible for causing the sinking. He sued his insurance company because he put in a claim on the boat and they didn't pay it, so they fought it out in court, and the judge essentially ruled that it was most likely Nathan's fault and not a mechanical failure. This finding became a cornerstone of the investigators' reconstruction of the boating accident.
Yeah, interesting, Joseph. So, to support the debate later, here are the explicit linkages investigators made. One was financial trajectory. So, 2013 murder, Nathan inherits 550,000. 2016 disappearance, Linda's $7 million share of John's estate. Guess what? That would pass to Nathan. There's some behavioral parallels too. The implausible explanations in both incidents and missing or destroyed evidence, like the gun, the GPS, the hard drive, the boat trim, the tab hardware. Oh, the proximity. So Nathan was the last known person with each victim. The timing, investigators argued the 2016 sinking, it actually completed a two-step plan to secure full inheritance. And the prosecutor's theory, which was a 22 indictment, it explicitly stated Nathan murdered John as part of a scheme that culminated in Linda's death. And this, my friends, is why investigators and the Chakalos daughters view both deaths as a single pattern rather than two separate tragedies.
And in 2017, Nathan's 3 surviving aunts file a Slayer action, seeking to block him from inheriting any portion of the estate. They publicly claim he murdered both John and Linda. A judge dismisses the suit on jurisdictional grounds, but does freeze certain assets.
Okay, so now the federal court ruling on the boat. Judge John McConnell denies Nathan's insurance claim, ruling his poor repairs caused a sinking. Though not a criminal conviction, the ruling strengthened the investigators' theory that the sinking was intentional.
In May of 2022, a federal grand jury indicts Nathan on 8 counts, including murder on the high seas for Linda's death and multiple fraud counts tied to the alleged inheritance scheme. Prosecutors outline a multi-year plan to murder the grandfather, inherit those funds, then murder his mother, and secure the remaining fortune. Nathan pled not guilty.
Months before the trial, June 15th, 2023, Nathan is found dead by suicide in jail. And with his death, the criminal case ends. John's murder remains officially unsolved. Linda's body is never recovered, and the remaining family is left with grief. but no legal resolution.
Wow, Adrian, this is a crazy case. One definite murder, one potential murder. I know a couple people in the room familiar with the case. Do you guys believe that Nathan was truly stranded at sea for 8 days? Or was his survival story crafted to conceal something nefarious that happened on the boat? What do you think? Was he really stranded?
No, I don't think he was stranded, and if you watch the documentary, he was in too good of a condition to been floating around for those many days. He would have been sunburnt, he would have been dehydrated, he would have been not able to walk, and he was able to walk right off that boat with them, and he seemed in good condition, and I just no. I do not think for 1 second that he had been on the ocean the amount of time that he claims he was on the ocean in that boat, in that life raft.
Joseph, I live in Connecticut. That ocean's a black hole, 62,000 square mile search. Do you know that bodies in Block Canyon vanish like 90% of this time due to currents and death? And okay, and pun intended, Nathan's story had holes. Sorry, I have to do a little pun in there. But the drowning fits, right? Sudden flood is like the sudden flooding, even if self inflicted by his bad repairs, panic and swells. Linda slips away in the dark. There's zero evidence of violence. There's no wounds on any hypothetical remains. There's obviously no witnesses. And I think his neurodivergence that kind of explains the odd like prep and silence and how he froze. I think she drowned in a tragic accident compounded by his incompetence. That's what I think.
So that's a good point, Adrian. He was super prepared. Basically, when they found him on the life raft, he had all these supplies, and it was almost unbelievable that someone who wasn't planning on sinking a ship and being stranded would have that much forethought and plan and be that prepared. But I actually think that no, there's a lot of people that are just very, very prepared. If I was on a boat in the middle of the ocean in the middle of the night, I'm definitely the type of personality who would have all those supplies, just God forbid anything happened. So I don't think that that in itself was suspicious. But for him to be that prepared and that tuned in to what potentially could happen, yet he didn't notice that he was basically leaving four gaping holes in the hull and should have known that that would have almost immediately capsized the boat. That's what doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? He's so prepared for a potential sinking, but he overlooked this giant, glaring, obvious thing that's going to cause said boat capsizing. So that's what doesn't make sense to me.
It's crazy, Joseph. So he eliminates Grandpa John. This is what they say, right? Shot in bed, and he gets $550,000. Boom, bitty, boom, boom, boom. And then it's like, oh, that's not a lot of money, 550,000. 3 years later, let me take mom out and let me grab her $7 million slice. I know, I'll just take her on a boat ride. No SOS, off course. I mean, I think that's why they called it a multi-year plan, right? It's crazy. Do you guys buy into that?
As diabolical as it sounds, it adds up. It makes sense. I mean, he didn't have a job. He didn't want to go to school. He didn't seem to really want to do anything. And granted, he had an autism diagnosis, so I'm sure that complicated trying to get a job, and some of those things were probably, I would imagine, more difficult, but he didn't seem like he really had any other way of supporting himself.
So without a body or confession, so he received the 550,000. He didn't have the body or the confession. Do you think that he really felt like that he would be able to receive the 7 million?
I mean, yeah, I guess I think if he was brazen enough to shoot someone for $550,000, yeah, I think he'd be brazen enough to try to drown someone for the 7 million and probably think he could get away with it, because if he did in fact kill the grandfather, then that would mean he killed someone, got away with it, and benefited financially. So who's to say he can't do it again?
Under Connecticut law, by the way, where I was born, a missing person can be declared legally dead after just 5 years of unexplained absence with no body requiring, allowing estates to proceed. But can you refresh me? When did he killed himself, committed suicide in prison?
Yes, yeah, he allegedly committed suicide in prison before the trial was underway.
And I believe he did that because his whole entire plan was to have all this money and live his life free and live the way he wanted to. And by going through the court case and the way everything pointed towards him and this diabolical plan that he had, he would have spent the rest of his life in prison, which is exactly where he didn't want to be because then he would be told when to eat, when to sleep, when to do whatever, go outside. And that was the one thing that he was trying to get away from.
That'd be interesting. Did it show that Nathan had very limited, if any, functional empathy? Like when you were like when they interviewed him, I know the family members described him as flat, emotionless. One aunt said that he at the grandfather's funeral he sat and straight ahead, never cried. And when he was asked about how he felt about his grandfather being shot in the head, a detective said that he replied, "I don't feel anything about it."
Yes, there was the absence of empathy, but that could have also been a part of his autism as well, because in a case of people with autism, that could be part of their personality where they don't have those emotions. So I don't necessarily say that it was, you know, there could be other explanations for it and not knowing how to react. And I mean, sometimes even people without any kind of disabilities, in certain situations, we don't know how to react and we don't know how we're gonna respond, and in that moment, he may not have felt anything, and then later on, it hit him, so we don't know that part of it because you never know what goes on behind the closed doors, but I do believe that the fact that he was autistic did play a role in the fact of his lack of empathy.
The Coast Guard rescuers who pulled him from the life raft, they did say that he never asked about his mother nor showed visible grief. Actually, the first thing he asked for was a cheeseburger and to call his aunts and not to tell them that their sister might be alive, but he called for money. And at the hospital, when a nurse said, "Your mom must be so worried," he answered allegedly, "My mom is dead." Any thoughts on that?
I know he definitely did ask about her on at least one occasion. They showed that in the documentary. He asked if they found her. But yeah, how concerned he was, I don't know. I agree with Debbie. From watching his interviews and watching the documentary, he definitely does appear to have kind of a flat affect, almost like an emotional blunting thing. But that could be the autism. That could also just be like a personality thing. Like I know a lot of people who aren't autistic who that's kind of just how they are. And that's kind of how they react, even in upsetting situations. They kind of just are stone faced, and then a lot of times they'll deal with it. You know what I mean? It'll hit them later. So I don't think just because someone doesn't react to something in the moment, I don't think that necessarily means they don't have empathy or feelings. I think everyone kind of processes and shows things, in their own way.
Thank you. So, what, Joseph, what do you think happened to Linda?
So I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit. And I just want to say that there's no evidence that anyone else was responsible for the grandfather's death or the boat sinking. But just to kind of throw another theory out there, the background on this family is that the grandfather was very controlling. The impression I got was he was not a good person. He was manipulative, controlling. He wanted his daughters under his thumb. They described a scenario where he manipulated one of the daughters and their husband to basically move back home, and he offered to buy them a franchise for some type of a franchise if they would come home. They came home and he reneged on the deal and basically was never planned on doing what he said he was going to do. He just wanted them under his thumb. So there was a lot of resentment, and in my opinion, a lot of motive to be out from underneath the financial control. And by all accounts, all of the daughters were kind of under his thumb in that way. So I don't think Nathan was the only person who may have wanted to see that man gone and maybe wanted to get the money to themselves. Now, I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but to me, there was definitely plenty of motive for other people to want to see him gone. And I think Nathan, being autistic, having a history of psychiatric problems and emotional instability, that would be the perfect fall guy if someone was diabolical, wanted to kill him, and then frame him for it.
Interesting story. Okay, we're live here on Chatter Social. You could download the app and join in the conversation. Whew, Joseph, grandfather's murder and the mother's disappearance. And imagine like planning it out and knowing that it's a two-step plan that's going to take some years. Or could they be two unrelated tragedies?
They could be. It's possible that someone outside of the family is the one who murdered the grandfather and it has nothing to do with any of them. And yeah, it could just be a coincidence.
I could say, like, with the grandfather, because they never really found out who murdered him and they could never prove any of that, I could buy that somebody else did that and tried to frame Nathan or bring it up. But the mother, yeah, I think he murdered his mother.
I do think it's weird though. I mean, I know that the two of them were not getting along. He was living in this trailer. They wanted him to do things and he didn't want to comply. He wanted to do his own thing. He also apparently didn't take his own autism diagnosis seriously. He didn't want to take medication. He didn't want to accept that he had that condition. So that caused a lot of obvious tension between the families. But what's confusing to me is if the mother was so concerned about the son's psychiatric condition, why would she go out on a boat with him at midnight? Like, that's weird to me. If I think someone's unstable and they're off medication that they should be taking, the last thing I would be doing is going on a midnight fishing trip with them at the helm of a 30-foot boat.
I do think they said in the documentary, though, that that was not an uncommon thing for them to do. If I remembered correctly, that they had gone on fishing trips before, and it was one thing that they liked to do together. But I do agree with you that it would it would not be at midnight at all for me on a boat. It would have to be daylight. I want to see what's around me. So yeah, that part is a little suspicious.
That was a thing that they did together, but I mean, it's like, okay, let's go to dinner. Let's spend time together, like in public around other people, not on the water.
But, being it was her son, you don't think and she supposedly, like, had a decent relationship with her son, but I would never think my son would do that to me. So, you're trusting this is your child. Even with psychiatric problems, like, you've dealt with it before, you've dealt with it all along, medication, no medication, you know your child's behavior. I don't think that that would have been my first thought is, "Oh, yeah, he's gonna take me out fishing because he wants to throw me overboard and get the money." So, I don't know. That's a tough one.
That makes sense. And if they had been out on the boat frequently and he obviously didn't try to throw her overboard before, yeah, she could probably just not think that.
To me, like, I would be like, "Oh my goodness, my son wants to spend time with me," because, kids, they don't wanna spend time with their parents. So, I would have been, like, all excited, and I probably would have gone out at any time with my kid to go fishing or whatever else they wanted to do. Although, again, I don't know about that midnight part because 'cause I'm not fond of boats as it begins with.
I agree, Debbie. I do not go on boats. I don't go in the ocean. I'm scared of sharks. So I would not be going on anyone's boat for any reason at any time of night.
I love fishing, but you're right. Nighttime is not my right time.
One thing that's interesting is Nathan said the boat capsized in a certain area. But according to the Coast Guard, who mapped out the different currents, they said that if the boat sank where he said it sank, there is no way they would have found him where they found him. He actually would have been in the completely opposite direction. So, what do we think actually happened? Do you think, like, how do you think that went down? Do you think that he intentionally sunk the boat and then just jumped off with the life raft and left the mom to sink into the ocean? Do you think he killed her? What do you think might have happened?
Being that he worked on the boat prior to them going out to the ocean, I believe that he rigged the boat in some way that he knew that I think he knew what was gonna happen. And where exactly it happened, I think he lied about that to try to throw it off because, if it was in an area they might wanna send divers down. He more than likely lied about that, and again, I'm gonna go back to the fact of he being on that raft for so many days. Why wasn't he you're in the ocean. You get a sunburn if you're standing in the sun. Imagine being on the ocean where the light is reflecting off that water. He would have been crispy fried by the time they found him, and he wasn't. So, what did how did he keep himself from getting so burned? That's why I can't fathom that he was on that life raft for 7 or 8 days and be in the healthy condition that he was in. So, yeah, it's a very strange case.
And when the boat finally found him and they stopped, they lowered down the ramp. There's a video of him just jumping off that raft, swimming right over and climbing right up like nothing happened. I mean, if you're on a raft in the middle of the ocean, on top of the sunburn, the dehydration, everything you mentioned, imagine if you had to sit in a crouching position for 8 days and you couldn't move. You wouldn't physically be able to exert yourself, in my opinion, in the way that he did when he was rescued.
That is actually one thing that they mentioned is how he was so, like, able to get up and do that, and I can understand being excited, maybe the adrenaline's flowing because, "Oh my goodness, I've been found." However, because of the way he was able he woulda had some kind of difficulty with standing or needed some kind of assistance because you are sitting in that position for so long. It just his physical condition just did not make sense to me that he could be so healthy after being on a boat for that, on this raft in the middle of the ocean for that many days. I just don't buy it.
Okay. So, first of all, it was September, right? 17th to 25th. So the swells were like maybe there are 3 5-foot swells. The air temperature 65 to 70, the water around 68. That's very similar to many open ocean raft survivals. It was 8 days. Very common to be 7 to 14 days is the average for raft rescues in the Atlantic. So, guys, if you're out in you may be like 2 weeks. He was dehydrated, mild hyperthermia, hungry, but alert and talking. That's identical to dozens of documented cases. Typically, the raft protects from the wave and sun. So there actually are real cases that are almost identical. Jose Salvador Alvarenga, 438 days in the Pacific. So there are cases, even in colder North Atlantic waters, people routinely survive 7 to 20 days. And I just wanted to share because I saw that part and I was like, yeah. He had a canopy, right? So that blocked the sun and it blocked the spray of water. He had a sea anchor and that kept the raft pretty stable in the swells. It was 68 degrees the water temperature. It's cold, but it's not instantly deadly. I see people swimming, Debbie, in Daytona Beach and it's 68 degrees. It's crazy to me. Most of the time they're coming from up north. He was able to, he rationed whatever water and food he had, and he knew enough to collect rainwater, which is like a standard survival technique. Don't ask me, but he's also, guess what? He's 22. He's pretty healthy, right? So I think when the Orient Lucky found him on the day 8, and they said, oh, he's thin, a little sunburned, looking like a castaway, but walking, talking, and immediately asking for food and a phone. That's really a textbook. That's for an 8-day Atlantic raft survival. That is not suspicious at all. From a survival standpoint, it's probably one of the few parts of Nathan's story that actually checks out 100%. Oh, you all agree with me?
Okay, well, one thing that's interesting is they were never able to examine the raft because when he got off of the raft, all of a sudden it started losing air, which was very interesting in the video. So when he got rescued and he gets off the raft, you can almost immediately see it start to lose its shape, which leads some people to believe that he intentionally sabotaged that raft as he was getting off of it so it would sink, because if they were to go and look at the raft, they would have seen that his rations and the equipment and the state of the raft does not line up with his 8 days at sea story.
Well, because this is debate the news, I'm going to debate that with you right now, Joseph. I'm putting on my boxing gloves. Yes, the raft sank immediately after he abandoned it to swim towards the freighter, but he kicked away and he climbed aboard using a ladder and life preservers. And the raft is now empty. It's untethered. It's taking on water from the waves. Of course, it's going to submerge rapidly. Yes, it was never recovered, which totally raises eyebrows. Like, what is going on here? But it wasn't like he punctured it or maybe a valve issue. I think it was simply the physics, the unweighted inflatable in moderate sea floods and it capsized easily once it's occupied. So that's what I think, Joseph.
But because they can't observe, like, they couldn't observe the raft, how do we know that he didn't puncture it and throw the knife in the ocean with the sinking raft? You don't know that. We don't know that. It's too convenient.
That mixed with the fact that the Coast Guard said there's no way he would have wound up where he said he was, that's what makes me think that he's lying. Because if he didn't do something sketchy, if he didn't have something to hide, if the boat really did just capsize and he drifted there, just like, why would he lie? Why would he lie about where the boat sunk if he didn't do anything wrong? That doesn't make sense to me.
And the not calling for help. Weird.
Yeah, that is very weird, especially because they believe that that equipment was functioning at the time, so he could have made the call. His excuse was that he didn't think there were any boats out there. I don't know about you guys, but if my boat is taking on water and it's the middle of the night and I'm in the middle of the ocean and I have a working radio, I'm not going to stop and say, you know what? Why bother? There might not be a boat around. I am turning that thing on and screaming for help. So that doesn't make sense either.
Joseph. Oh boy, you are so right. Oh boy. Weird though that it drifted eastward for 8 days when the current showed that that drift was actually west and northwest toward Nantucket, not east. So that's either he lied about the sinking location to hide the evidence and to make finding her harder. And I mean, let's be honest, finding anyone in the ocean, I don't even know how many times someone is actually found in the ocean considering how deep the ocean is and what they would need to actually go down there. I mean, we can't even find, lost boats. I mean, look how many years it took to find the Titanic. So I find that really interesting. Oh, by the way, he bought the bait for fishing, but he left it unloaded in his truck at the marina. Oh, you're going fishing, but you leave your bait in your truck. That's weird.
Exactly. Yet he had all the supplies he would need, just God forbid the boat capsized, like enough for 8 days worth of being stranded on a raft. Didn't forget any of that stuff, but forgot the bait and forgot that there was 4 holes in the boat. Very interesting.
Oh, and by the way, didn't he file for like 85,000 insurance claim and it was denied for the holes in his story?
He did, and that is what really got him into trouble, they said, is he filed a claim for the boat, and by disputing that and getting into litigation with the insurance company has the money and the resources and the staff to do a full investigation and figure out what happened. That's resources that the Coast Guard and the local officials just didn't have or weren't willing to take that on. So when he actually tried to fight the insurance company, their investigation basically revealed way more than the police would have ever found out. And at the conclusion of that civil case, the insurance company handed over all of that evidence to the police department, and then the FBI got involved, and they eventually brought charges against him using a lot of that evidence from the civil case.
Yeah, very, very true. And Joseph, see if there's any other questions. Of course, we have to give our tips for safety in this matter. So I am ready when you are.
Yeah, I think we are good. This is a very strange case, and my takeaway, honestly, is I guess we'll never know. I think it's very suspicious. I think he probably did do what he's accused of, but you know what? You never know. You never know.
So these tips are for if you see these kind of patterns in your family. So, first of all, if you have a friend, family member, someone you know that's saying, I'm afraid of my own child, treat it as a 5 alarm fire. There is evidence that Linda told friends, she wrote in journals, she put it on a video in 2014 that she was scared of her son, Nathan. The moment an adult child makes you afraid in your own home, that is no longer just a mental health issue, it's a lethal risk issue. Please call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1 800 799 7233 or local abuse agency, even if the abuser is your kid. They have protocols for adult child threats. Second, my friends, change the money before you change the locks. The number one thing that kept Linda in danger was the 7 million inheritance dangling in front of Nathan. Seeing an estate attorney immediately, rewriting your will and trust to put that money in a protective trust that bypasses the dangerous child, give it to your nieces or nephews or charity. Do not tell your child you've done this until the documents are signed and filed. Linda unfortunately waited too long. Her sisters only froze the estate after she was gone. Third tip, never go anywhere isolated with a person who scares you, ever. Please don't get on the boat. Don't go to a remote cabin. Don't take a long drive to talk. Please tell at least 5 people the full truth. Linda did tell some friends and her sisters, but many people still saw Nathan as just quirky. Be explicit. I am afraid he will kill me for the inheritance. The more people who hear those exact words, the harder it is for police or family to dismiss. This is another important one. Have what's called a dead man switch phrase with a trusted friend. So agree on a code word, right? Or like, how's on Susan's cat? And if you say, how's on Susan's cat? That means call 911 right now. I'm in danger. Linda was 60 to 70 miles offshore with no cell service. A prearranged check-in call she missed is what finally triggered the search. And if you're the grandparent that you're playing the John Chakalos role, please do not dangle large direct inheritance in front of a troubled grandchild or child as motivation. Put the money in a spendthrift trust that pays out small amounts over decades or only for specific purposes like school or medical. John's like tough love but big checks approach created the exact motive that likely killed him and Linda. Back to you, Joseph.
Absolutely, Adrian. And this is not financial advice, but absolutely. If you even think for 1 second that someone who's the beneficiary of your money might harm you, if that even crosses your mind, it is time to speak with your estate planner and get that figured out. That's not normal.
So the Carman family story is really a devastating reminder that even in families with wealth, opportunity, and stability, darkness can take root in ways no one sees until it's too late. And 2 people are gone, a grandfather and a mother, and the only person who might have answered the remaining question is no longer alive to speak.
This case leaves us with mystery, motive, suspicion, and heartbreak. And like many of the cases we cover, it forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about family dynamics, mental health, and the limits of the justice system. Thank you for joining us tonight on Debate the News True Crime. We'll see you next time. Until then, stay safe, stay vigilant, and take care of yourselves and each other. Good night.